YouTube. And we are excited to bring back, for his monthly visit here, Ben Reiter. He's certified financial planner, Kingdom Financial Group.
Internet celebrity. Facebook,
Are you?
Facebook and YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, you should be pushing these out to your peeps, right?
That's right.
Yeah. We were talking about music going into the break here, and of course, I came of age in the 70s. I was a college student in the 80s, and so that's my era, right? That's why you hear YouTube.
Yep.
For the breaks and things.
Can't stand YouTube. That's okay.
But, I mean, you came up in the aughts, didn't you?
Yeah. I was in high school around 2000. So around 2000. So that's a weird little. I feel like we got a weird mix of music around that time. Of course, pop.
You were out of grunge.
Right, out of grunge. Pop and then rap exploded around then.
Mm-hmm.
The weird ones that I wouldn't admit to listening to a lot of them. But you got Eminem and Dre. And Snoop were huge at that point.
They were big, yeah.
But then there was still the grunge and the rock. The classic, the screaming started, and then punk made a comeback at that point too.
Talk about
punk,
Limp Bizkit and that
Limp Bizkit. Yeah. Should I get in? Disturbed and a bunch of weird ones.
Yeah.
But so there's a wild, and I feel like I've always been that way. Of a little bit of I'm fairly eclectic when it comes to music.
Sure.
Nothing offends me except for most of the 80s stuff.
Which is crazy. That is a crazy thing.
I don't like it.
Wow.
All the keyboards and weird things.
That's funny.
No, it's fun. Hey, happy opening weekend of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, the Yankees
kicked it off last night.
Yankees haven't let any runs through, so they've got a pure record for one day.
Stinking Yankees. My Sacramento Athletics start tomorrow night.
Is that where they're playing?
The A's are in Sacramento this year.
Are they calling them the Sacramento Athletics?
No, only halfway.
Okay.
So I think it's this year and next year they're supposed to be in Sacramento, and then they're going to Vegas.
Okay.
I don't know how I feel about that, but
Yeah, I don't feel. I mean, again, talk about a rabbit trail, but it's you mean to tell me that the East Bay can't afford a major league team? The home of San Jose and Palo Alto and all that Silicon Valley.
Third or fourth largest media market in the country.
Right.
No,
plus
can't handle it.
Plus all the cash.
Tons of money. Right. Yeah. No, but it's been 25 years of fights and negotiations. But I've said it before, but I've told people, my team, because I was born out there and we moved to Ohio when I was 10. Okay. So my teenage years in Ohio, and that's after and when the Browns were moving.
Okay.
So now my team is leaving where I grew up, where they were. Wow. I feel like a 90s Browns fan.
Yes, yeah, they're abandoning me. Well, hey, this is going to bring up. I'm going to make it pertinent to our financial conversation. Do you ever run into situations where clients or people that want to invest into non-traditional avenues? Let's say I want to buy a sports team, or I want to buy an exotic car. I want to buy cars as investments.
Yeah.
And you think about, I want to be a part of a real estate group that's building apartments or commercial real estate. I'm sure you run into this kind of stuff.
Not too many people buying sports teams. I haven't found any clients like that yet. I'm still looking because the capital. But no, you're absolutely right. I've talked to tons of people. Real estate's a really popular one. Of course, people getting in trying to think, how do I become a mogul? That sort of thing. Vehicles, sure. Really, they're good examples of specialty items. I lump it into literally entrepreneurs that fall into different risk levels. And so that's what's wild about it, is that some people are, but there's quite a few people that think they're experts in certain areas.
Okay.
Right? And so it opens up a level of risk that people sometimes ignore. of the hands-on-ishness that needs to be part of it, of you really do need to be an expert. I tend, just because it's a little bit easy for me, I pick on real estate sometimes because it is a thing that people can get into. You don't have to have years of experience. You don't have to. What happens to most people, though, is they never sit down and actually do the math. So we get really excited about it because we all hear about that. There's only so much land in the world.
Right.
And God's not making any more of it.
Yeah.
So real estate's an interesting investment, right? But most people never sit down and they look at the math. They say, hey, I bought a house for $100,000. I kept it for a long time, and 20 years go by, and I sell it for $200,000. I just made $100,000. I doubled my money. Sounds great, right? Yeah. But that's about a 3% return in 20 years. Not that great, right?
Interesting.
and I didn't even get it. It gets deeper in the finance world because you start looking at things using that example, like property taxes and insurance that I had to pay the entire time, and the repairs, and this. And so not enough people, when they get into that specialty style investing, I didn't even throw taxes out there.
Right.
Not enough people actually sit down and do the math at the end of the day. And so I just invested 20 years of my life thinking about this thing.
Wow.
I better love it and get some enjoyment out of it, because what is the actual return on the holding? Doesn't matter if it's cars, baseball cards.
I mean, they say that boats are not great investments. Again, you can buy a boat. If you're going to use the boat, then you're enjoying it.
Yeah, I go, that's not an investment.
It's not an investment.
Not for the average person.
No.
There's people out there selling them that are making money on it. And I go, well, that's because they're specialists, right? And they've got some way to get into it. But for an average person, I never hear about anybody flipping boats.
My gosh.
Unless there's some sort of buying, a sheriff's sale one, and they know how to fix it. But even that, what's boats? Another 1,000?
All right, let's get to the news of the day.
Yeah.
And I'll start with what you probably aren't thinking of, which is 3 weeks from tax deadline.
Yeah, I'm not thinking of it. We're getting close because we're in the middle of it.
Are you guys pretty much, is your tax services pretty much jammed up now?
Yeah, the tax business is full speed. Not closed, no.
You could take people at the...
Yeah, but there's no promises on whether you can get them done or not.
Okay, it could be an extension.
You can do extensions and that sort of thing. That's the life of every accountant at this point. They got the majority of the tax returns are in, and so they're literally trying to do the physical work of doing the tax return.
What about, I feel like they really sold that we're going to get big money back, like your tax liabilities for the average American, we're going to really shrink, and people that will get money back this year. Are you seeing that?
Yes and no. I don't see it. I don't tend to believe all of that. Okay. I've talked to quite a few clients about the senior deduction. Everybody over 65 gets an extra $6,000 deduction. That has made a difference, for some people, and so that would mean a slightly different refund. Taxes, like financial planning, are always an individual scenario. And so what's interesting is last year was a fantastic year in the markets generally for investing and investments. And so there's a lot of people out there who made more money last year. So their income went up. They got a bigger tax deduction, but their income's a lot higher. So what they paid in taxes didn't change that much on paper.
Right.
In real life it did, but it was a good year for making money. And so they may or may not notice unless they kind of drill into it. That's always fascinating.
Yeah.
It's kind of like one of the...
So if they're out there just investing without the tax shelter part of like an IRA or a Roth, I mean, they get pounded on. I mean, they probably are... Thinking that they would have to do even quarterly taxes, based on
even maybe somebody who's retired who has retirement accounts, it's been a pretty good 3 years ever since 2022. And so the accounts are up. Maybe it's time to spend money. Maybe I took more withdrawals last year. So it's an individual thing depending on what year is. But overall, with that extra deduction and a couple other changes as far as brackets staying the same and stuff. Yeah, no, it's I'm glad it's almost April 15th.
Yeah, I bet. Ben Reiter is with us, certified financial planner with Kingdom Financial Group. Okay, so the other headline is we are at war.
Yeah.
And that is the geopolitical reality of that.
Right.
Really leans hard on the markets.
Now, in my world, at least for me, the most fascinating part, and this is one of those times where you're supposed to say like no promises or anything, but it's fascinating that this year is overlapping and almost looks like a mirror image of last year so far. Because last year, if I remember correctly off the top of the dome, we started the year off okay in 2025. And then what happened in March last year?
Well, April was tariffs. The tariffs,
yeah,
right? The
tariffs
Independence Day or whatever.
So when they announced the tariffs, the very next day in your and I life, did anything change?
Mm-mm.
No, right? For the average person, nothing actually changed. But when they announced the tariffs, to say this as non-politically as possible, announced the tariffs, some people thought it was a good idea. Believe it or not. Some people thought it was the end of the world. In truth, nobody knew how it was going to play out, right? Which is, I talk about this all the time. I've been saying it in the office for months now. All that is uncertainty, which is the one thing the market hates the most, is not knowing how this is going to play out. And so last year, we had to watch that as the negotiations happened all through the summer, into the fall, those negotiations with those individual countries. And this is history now. The market ended a pretty good growth year last year.
But like April 7th,
March,
it tanked.
negative 10%.
Yeah.
Right then. So here we are 1 year later, after a good year in growth. Here we are. And in March,
yes.
the government starts a war. And right now, some people think it's going to be a short, quick war. Mm-hmm. Some people think it's World War III. In truth, nobody knows. We don't know. Everybody's reading, consuming the same stuff. We're all listening, trying to find out. It's very scary in a real life human sense. I try to separate that out every once in a while. I go, I'm talking about money, but let's, the human side, this is horrific, right?
Sure.
But when it comes to the markets, we just don't know. Which, again, is uncertainty. Because before that all started, market's doing fine. The economy's all right. Unemployment's at an acceptable level. Inflation is back in the 3-4% range, depending on which day you look and whose stuff you read. That's all historically normal. So it's very fascinating that most of the market downturn, in my opinion, is uncertainty. Is not knowing how is this going to play out over the next month, 2 months, 3 months. No one knows.
I want you to pull way back, though. Let's look at a 10 or 20-year timeline.
Yeah.
Aren't we like majorly due for a pretty chunky bear market? Like just as history has called it. We had the big downturn in 2008 and 2009.
Yeah.
I want to say there was another one during COVID, right?
2 years later, 2022 mostly.
Yeah.
End of 21, most of 22. That's when
got real bearish.
When the inflation hit the news and it got really high, the Federal Reserve started to raise interest rates really fast for the first time in years.
So did the 2022 downturn kind of squeeze out the contagion? We're kind of good for a while now, because it's like every 7 years or something like that.
Yeah, right? It's kind of funny because that's another statistic that if I was reading it with disclosure in front of me, I would say who said this. But I've seen it in the last 100 years, every 7 years. That recently it's been like every 6.5. Then I see other people say 8. But we typically have a recession every once in a while.
Yeah.
Now, what's funny is if you go back and look at them like the last 4 or 5, they're never for the same reason. Something gets out of balance and we have a recession. So we had one in the late 80s, and then all through the 90s we grew, and then in the United States we created the internet and the economy exploded, and in 2001 we had the tech bubble burst. 2008 comes along. Everybody then in the early 2000s starts making money again.
Right.
Everybody makes money. What do? They take it to the bank. They start putting money in the bank. Once it's in the bank, what does the bank do?
Invest.
They loan it out. They invest it. And when banks make money, what do they want to do next? Not wrong. This is not wrong, by the way. But when banks make money, what do they want to do next?
They want to
make more.
Make more money, sure.
They want to make more, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so they kept loaning money out.
Yeah.
And now they loan money out to people maybe they shouldn't, right?
So we went from a tech bubble to a real estate bubble.
Real estate and banking kind of crisis in 08,
yeah.
and we had a recession. And what theoretically happens with recessions is that it corrects the problem. Something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the 2022, that's a really debatable one. I'm interested in what's going to go on in history books and in economics books. But if you kind of look at it, interest rates and inflation had been zero all through the teens, right? And then they never raised interest rates in a meaningful way. In fact, they came back down to zero after when COVID kicked off. And
it was a ridiculous moment where they were saying maybe we can get people to to borrow or something. There was zero interest in borrowing.
Now, in my education where I went to school, basically in an economics class in college, they taught that in any country that decides to print money, guess what the next thing to happen in your economy is? Inflation. Mm-hmm. Because you've printed money. And that happened in COVID. Right or wrong. I'm not going to say, but everybody voted for it. Yeah. But that's literally what they did. And so for the first time, I would argue, since the 80s, we had above average high inflation. And then we had 2 quarters in a row where we had negative GDP growth, which in some textbooks in this country still says that's the definition of a recession.
Yes.
Right? And that was 22. Right. So they come about for different reasons. Mm-hmm. And that last one by the textbooks was a few years ago.
I'm just wondering, if between AI and the circular wheeling and dealing that are going on between the tech firms and the what is it? It's like it's the chip makers and the software makers. Yeah. The AI.
Yeah.
And it just seems like they're self-dealing
for years.
And meanwhile, they're really driving the market. And NVIDIA and Anthropic and OpenAI, and they're all driving the market.
And there's some legitimate concerns there around how far can it go and whether they start to generate revenue. The exciting part on the finance side of AI and stuff is that it's evolving industries.
Yeah.
The theory is to make them more efficient so that they can continue to grow. Right. Well, that's a good way of saying it. That's what they're trying to do, right? Yeah. But does it get overbought? Do we have a correction at some point? So you watch out for those areas. That, in my opinion, that actually started near the end of last year, is that people started looking at some of the big companies and saying, hey, we know AI's here. We made a lot of investments. The price of these companies is going way up. What's the revenue? Are they making any money yet? And it actually started back in January. We saw some of the Magnificent Seven and some of the other ones have some days where people were kind of questioning it. Mm-hmm. So that's all fascinating in the weeds market stuff.
Sure.
Everyone forever has always tried to guess what's the next recession. There's somebody out there banging the table today saying, hey, here's a problem. And only every once in a while, on average, once every 7 or 8 years, somebody's right. Right?
Well, but didn't you find that most of your clients that kept buying through the 2022 downturn, have had a better position coming out of it?
Yeah, correct.
Because then in 2023, they scored. It's
really basic. You own more shares, and then the last 3 years, the market's gone back up. And so you've gotten that growth. And that is the craziest part about literally what's going on this month, is that there's a war on, and it makes us all nervous, as it should, and there's uncertainty. But historically, just talking about history, is that with market swings like that, is that when it changes, when the other headline comes out that this is coming, is that you see the swing the other way also.
Yeah.
And so if you get nervous while it's down and you decide, I want to have everything out or I want to be safe, is that you miss the upswing. And there's tons of studies out there. You can just Google it. If you miss the 5 best days every year or the 10 days in the last 10 years, there's a bunch of them that says what you get out of investing is greatly diminished, if not zero.
If you miss 5 days,
if you miss the 5 best days, right?
Wow.
My old statistic, this little facetious, I always like saying, is I can tell you right now when the 5 best days in the market are every year.
When are they?
I'm not. I'll say it on the radio. You want to
yes,
guess?
Please.
When are the 5 best days every year?
Yeah, when are they?
They're right after the 5 worst days. Right? It's just an example.
Sense.
It's not true, but those upswings. And so, when
those percentage of growth.
And when do people get out of their investments? when it's down and they're scared. Right. And historically, looking at the last 100 years or so, that's the wrong time to be getting out. It's the opposite. The hardest thing is the contrarian side of investing says, I should have gotten out when it was at all-time highs, right? So it's fun.
It's why you need a plan.
Yeah, just to talk through it and keep your goals in mind. You know, this month, go back and look at your goals and say, did my plans change because of what's going on around the world?
Yeah.
Or do I have the same goals, the same wants, the same desires, you know? And so how does that affect my long-term investments or insurance or financial planning?
How to get a hold of you?
Hey, we're right downtown Erie. It's 652 West 6th Street. Phone number is 814-836-5234.
Ben Reiter, certified financial planner. Again, this does not constitute real financial advice, but we're just chatting up the news of the day.
Happy opening day.
Happy opening day. Go Bucks. Go Guardians.
Go A's.